So I got to see Nobody 2 at a early release or Thursday night release, and I have to say, this sequel does not disappoint. Of course, we do have Bob Odenkirk returning as Hutch. Unfortunately, though, it is a new writer and a new director coming to this project. Although, something I was shocked at that I saw as the credits started to roll is that Tobey Maguire actually was an executive producer of this film, along with the first one, which is something I had no idea he did. I did take a quick sneak peek after my screening and looked at his IMDb filmography and noticed that he actually does do a decent amount of producing. And because I always kind of wonder like what happened to him, because he seemed like he hasn't been on screen in a while, or really hasn't done much on screen. But he's been doing a lot more work behind the scenes, which is always good to see. That he's still working and very active in the industry. But moving on to what you came here to see, the review for Nobody 2. Now, sequels are always tricky, especially ones of this magnitude, ones that have a solid foundation in your first film, especially in the action genre, where it kind of like the horror genre, it's always going to be trying to replicate what was done the first time versus continuing a story, or continuing a story. Because in other genres, you can have sequels that are a continuation of the story, whereas in this particular genre, it's pretty much just recreating the spark that was there and trying to maintain that. Now, as far as box office goes, I haven't seen anything for predictions on how this is going to do. I was reading an article earlier that the Ballerina, the John Wick spinoff, lost like $100 million in the box office, and they pretty much nixed all the spinoff and prequel ideas they were going to do, like this whole like spinoff of John Wick, and just continue to push out and really milk the franchise. Which I liked Ballerina. It was definitely a fantastic film, great for what it was. Again, I didn't expect it to do as well as John Wick because, again, I think they over projected it because, again, it's a standalone film. It's not a sequel, really. It's a spinoff, but it's really not a sequel. Like, anyway, we're going way off topic. Nobody 2. This was actually a really solid film, even for a sequel. Again, it gives us more of what we had in the first film, but in the sequel, he starts off working his nobody job. So the action sequences start off a lot sooner. There's a lot more, and it's a lot more bloodier and intense. Like some say, I've seen some earlier reviews where nitpicking the film, saying that the spark is gone, that it just isn't that good. And I disagree. I think this film definitely is everything you would expect from this movie. Now, going in knowing that this is going to be an action shoot 'em up film, you get you get what you expect and then some. We have Roz returning as Hutch's brother, and again, his is again a cameo in this film, like it was in the first. But I feel like in this film he had a little bit bigger of a role, and he got to really show off more in this film, I'll say. Which, again, if you love kung fu films and you're big into that genre, and you know of Roz and his background and his love for kung fu films, it's even so much sweeter in this film, and seeing him in this film really was like the cherry on top. Now, for an average moviegoer, you probably won't get the references. You might not pick up on, the Easter eggs, if you will, that are kind of put down in there. But even just as an average filmgoer, going into this action movie, you're not going to be disappointed. It was very well paced. The action was steadily throughout, and the punches landed. I mean, it was a solid action film. Again, it had this undertone of this like comedic kind of moments, but it worked because it wasn't tongue-in-cheek. And again, going over pretty much the plot, if we're already halfway through the review, I haven't gotten to that part yet. It's a pretty straightforward plot. He's back to work, doing his nobody job, and it's put a toll on his marriage and his family, And he's like, you know what? We need a vacation. Let's take a vacation, and I'm gonna take some time off work, and we're gonna have a vacation. Of course, the spark that sparks this film is the same that happened in the first one. Somebody messed with his family, and he kind of lost it, and that kind of opened up Pandora's box. As we see in the trailer, you see that there's an issue at the arcade. One of the security guards smacked his daughter in the head. As they left, he goes, "Oh, I'll be right back. I forgot my phone." And the wife's like, "Hutch, Hutch," because she knew what was about to go down. So, of course, like we see in the trailer, he goes back in the arcade and he does this thing, which kind of opens up the plot line of how he got himself in another situation, just like the first film. So, again, originality, not really there, but on a scale of expectation, you don't really expect an action movie sequel to have originality as much as more of what you already know and love, just on a higher level. Again, I compare it to the horror film genre. Horror films sequels are never really that original. They're just more of what you already love. But the rules of horror kind of mimic the rules of action, or rules of action kind of mimic the rules of horror. Sequels, you got to have a bigger body count, bloodier, and more gun and well, I'm not gonna say more gun and explosions, because depending upon the film, you're not necessarily gonna have that, but you need a more intensified action sequences, which this film definitely has. Like I said, great cameo from Roz. Absolutely love that part. This is kind of the cherry on top, and this film definitely is a step up as far as the action sequences. The body count, the blood, and the fight choreography is definitely there. Now, again, when I say the fight choreography is really good, that's for your average moviegoer, not somebody who is heavily into action films, kung fu films. Are you going to say, "Oh, this is some of the best choreography"? It's not on the same level as The Matrix, but it's definitely up there for what it is. Again, I absolutely love this movie. Borderline between a full price and a Ferris Bueller, because it's a lot of fun. I potentially would go and see this movie again, depending upon, my schedule and how things work out. If the opportunity presented itself, I would definitely go see this again in theaters. But it's not something that I would actually cut out and make on my top priority to see this over a new film. So I'm gonna lean back a little bit and go with a full price, because I feel like a full price, you're not gonna be disappointed. And it's definitely gonna be worth seeing in theaters on the big screen. I had to see it in Dolby. Absolutely phenomenal. So with that being said, have you saw the film? Are you planning on seeing it? Comment below. Let me know. And as always, if you like to see here and you want to see more, click right there to see more.